Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to this special online meeting. Welcome. Rotary connects the world through celebrating our friendships, diversity, and unity of purpose. Please welcome President Adriano Sistemino.
Thank you, Rajiv, and welcome everyone to our lunch meeting 4799 and our fifth online meeting. A very special welcome to our guest speaker, Professor Ruth Rentschler OAM, who Rajiv Kamineni will more formally introduce later in the meeting. Welcome, Ruth. Welcome also to any other guests and visiting Rotarians connected that I don't know. From this week, I will be mentioning individually the guests that we receive notification via the email sent to Secretariat. So today, welcome to Stephanie Eglinton, which is a guest of Trish Shawkett, and welcome also to Rotarian Katie Halliday, who we will hear more from during our Spotlight on Service today. Birthday greetings. We've got Tony Norris, whose birthday was last Monday. Jeff Tate. Jeff turned 97 yesterday. Rob Bowker today. Happy birthday, Rob, if you are online with us. And Alex Smith, whose birthday is tomorrow. Happy birthday to you all. Also celebrating their anniversaries this week, we've got Police Commissioner Grant Stevens, 4 years. Trevor Sterling, 36 years in Rotary, of which 6 with us, with our club. Brenton Wittenbury, 80 years. And Graham Lee, who I've seen online, for 14 years. Congratulations to you all. As usual, all important announcement will be shared by our bulletin each week, and also through our Facebook page and WhatsApp group. There are currently no updates or changes to our meeting arrangements, so we will continue to meet online by Zoom and also use this tool to continue to operate all the other aspects of the club so that we can deliver our committed humanitarian service outcomes. Again, this week it is great to see South Australia and Australia in general trending quite well on the number of COVID-19 spread and impact. And seeing a few restrictions starting to be removed as well. That's great. Hopefully, we continue to trend well so that we can soon expect to resume our normal activities. I hope that many of you who stayed back and joined the breakout rooms last week enjoyed the experience, and we will be doing that again today, so at the end of the meeting. So just a reminder that after closing the meeting today, I will be setting up a number of rooms in which you'll be randomly split, and you can have an opportunity then to catch up with a few fellow members. You will need to accept an invitation to join the room. Once you're in, then you can chat with whoever is in that room and continue a conversation as if you are sitting at a table. We're keeping an eye on this concept over the following weeks, and we might keep tweaking it until we land onto a format that everyone is happy and comfortable with. And lastly, a reminder that we are recording today's meeting as well, and we will be sharing that over by tomorrow, probably or through our social media channels, website, and YouTube channel. Enjoy your lunch, whatever you've personally selected today to eat and drink, and in the online shared company of like-minded people. Don't forget also that there is still an opportunity to contribute to our community service project by making a donation by our website. I will share a link once I'm off this introduction. I will now hand over to host for today, our speaker's host, Rajiv Kamineni.
Thank you, President Adriano. But most of our Rotarians know about our Spotlight on Service, but for the benefit of visitors and guest speaker Ruth, briefly introduce Spotlight on Service talks about the service part of Rotary, and we at Rotary Club of Adelaide, service is an essential integral part of us. And every week we spend about 2 or 3 minutes having the spotlight on one of the service aspects. Today we have the opportunity to hear about what we are doing in Rotary and our club. And today we will hear from Rotarian Katie Halliday on her RILA Oceania experience, which our club has supported. Katie, it's yours.
Thank you.
Yep. Hi, Katie.
Hey, everyone. I just tell you a little bit about the RILA Oceania program, which is a brand new program for RILA alumni across Australia, New Zealand, and the whole oceanic region. It's a bit different to our local RILA program. Obviously, the demographics are different, which, because our local RILA are for people aged between 18 to 26 that generally live within our district. But the demographics for the RILA Oceania program, there were 24 participants across 13 different Rotary districts in 2 countries, Australia and New Zealand. And the average age was about 28, with participants ranging from 25 to 35 years old. So it's a bit of an advanced RILA program, I guess you could say. And for me, it came at the perfect time, having spent quite a few years working volunteering as a participant and then as a team leader, coordinator and trainer for our local RILA program. I was really excited to hear about an advanced RILA program. So I jumped at the opportunity to take that on, and I'm very grateful to your club and the other clubs that agreed to sponsor me to attend this program. Another big difference between local RILA and RILA Oceania is that our local RILA program is a week-long residential, whereas the RILA Oceania program begins with a week-long residential, but is actually a program that extends over 12 months. And a big part of that program is the leadership curriculum that is delivered across an online platform. So we get new content every month, new activities to engage in with our fellow participants, and discuss and share what we're learning as we go along throughout the year. But another big aspect of the program is the community project that we've been assigned to. So before our initial week residential, we were given 6 different project briefings and asked to submit preferences for which project we would like to work on. And luckily, every single participant was assigned either their first or second preference for a project to work on. So I've been really fortunate to be assigned to the project assisting the Rotary LGBT Fellowship to help promote LGBT inclusion within Rotary. That fellowship is a new fellowship that was established in 2018 at the Toronto Convention, which I was fortunate to attend. So I'm very happy to be helping them and look at what they can do to promote inclusion for LGBT members within Rotary, particularly given my role professionally working in diversity and inclusion for South Australia Police. So the program, we're about a quarter of the way in, and it's going really well. It's exceeded my expectations, so I'm very happy with how the program's going and grateful to be involved. It's benefiting me personally and professionally as well, and I think a lot of my professional experience assists with our community project as well. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to attend, and especially grateful for the support that I've received from the local Adelaide clubs and the district as well, to take a chance on sending me to a brand new program, which so far has proved to be really successful, and we're well set up, given that it's mostly an online program. We're well set up to continue given the current restrictions for in-person gatherings anyway. More than happy to answer questions, but I have written a little snapshot into my experience so far in a blog article that's on my Adelaide City Rotaract Club website that I'm happy to share. So there's some more details in there, but I'm also happy to answer any questions at any point if anyone would like to know more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. If anyone has questions, probably you can put it in the chat, and Katie can answer in the end after the session if need be. You're going to stay back, right, Katie? Yeah, okay, thank you.
And possibly, Katie, just share the link in the chat as well.
Your blog link,
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for today, Professor Ruth Rentschler. Ruth is a management scholar in the context of arts and culture with a history of implementing change program, especially integrating online face-to-face teaching and integrating it with research while developing an international profile as a researcher. She was head School of Management at University of South Australia and was also the former Associate Dean of Research Education. Ruth is on the board of Australian Dance Theatre. She has served on various other organizations like Deakin University Council, Victoria Health, it's a ministerial appointment, Multicultural Arts Victoria and Duldig Museum and Sculpture Garden, Art Gallery of Ballarat, where she took leadership roles and was counted as a trusted and authentic leader. Ruth's passion is in arts, leadership, and governance. And her topic today is going to focus on how the state government is focusing on arts boards, governance, and diversity in the review which was conducted in 2019. And the topic which Ruth is going to talk about is gender and ethnic diversity on arts boards, which she's very well qualified and she's written and researched extensively on it. For her contribution to the arts in Australia, Ruth was awarded an Order of Australia, OAM. So, ladies and gentlemen, Rotarians, please welcome Professor Ruth Rentschler talking on gender and ethnic diversity on arts boards. Does policy follow practice or practice follow policy?
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you, Ruth. Do you want me to start sharing the screen, or you want to talk?
If you start sharing the if you start sharing the shared screen,
Yes.
That's a tongue twister. That would be fabulous. Thank you. So if we put it onto the full screen, thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about gender and ethnic diversity on arts boards, and I've had some experience, as Rajiv said, on arts boards. Before I start, I'd just like to move to the next slide. Thank you, Rajiv, and acknowledge that we're meeting on the Ghana lands. If we're in Adelaide, in fact, I'm for the time of the pandemic in Melbourne, where it's the Wathaurong people. But I acknowledge how important those lands are to elders past, present and future. Next slide, thanks Rajiv. If you could start the music. This is an excerpt from Bach's St. Matthew's Passion. The reason I chose to start with this is that everybody on an arts board that I've ever spoken to, and I've spoken to more than 100 people for a book I wrote on arts governance and for other articles I've had published, every single one, even if they came onto that board as an accountant or a lawyer, said that they had passion. And that passion can be something that causes you to suffer, as Christ suffered on the cross, and you can see the picture in the background of Christ hauling the cross, and this is a recurring image in the arts over many, many decades. It's something about a tense in motion, a feeling, or a desire, a love of something, and many of the people I spoke about talked about their love of the arts, their love of the company on which they're a member of an arts board. So it also has to do with romance, attraction, desire, but in an occupational sense, it motivates people to participate in the arts when mostly, as with sport boards as well, you are not paid. You're doing it pro bono. Next slide, thank you, Rajiv. So passion, some of the people I spoke to told me the following things about how they see what they're doing on arts boards. One man said to me, I love the opera. I joined the board so that I could make a difference in an art form I love. Now, he was a partner in a very traditional law firm, but he wanted to join an opera board because he loved the opera. So as I said, that passion crosses boundaries. You can be a dry as ditch water lawyer, black letter lawyer, but you love the opera, and that's why you joined that board. At the community level, so you've got from the high arts now down to the community level, someone else said to me, I sing with a community choir and in a gospel choir. I'm familiar with being on stage. I bring that passion and empathy to the arts board. Another man. So it's not just women, it's men as well. And the other thing they talked about was that feeling of commitment. And that was the form of passion for them. I'm committed to seeing outcomes for that art board, a female arts board member said to me. It's more than being a performer, as in earlier days. Now it's being a contributor in other ways. And what I'm going to talk about in our brief half hour this afternoon is that passion is not enough. You do need something else. Because passion, when we're looking at diversity, passion can boil over and it can become negative, as you see on the red-hand side of the slide here. It can be challenging, it can lead to disagreements, people can be inflexible. You can see arts organisations in crisis. Some of them during COVID-19 are going to be in crisis now. The crisis is probably not caused by COVID-19, but it's really caused by the fact that their budget is out of control, and then this might be the thing that tips them over. So they can become dysfunctional, they could collapse. Some organisations will collapse. One of the things people said to me is that arts boards can be bitchy. It's not all milk and honey. And some people, of course, are self-aggrandising. They're not there for the good of the art or the good of the organisation. They're there to promote themselves. On the positive side, there are some very, very good things that people say about what diversity means on an arts board. It can be an opportunity for the arts organisation to change. It can be an opportunity to do things differently in governance at that peak of the organisational level. It can be about knowledge and extending networks and making things look quite different from the way they've looked for the last 30 years. Next slide, thank you. So what did people say to me about diversity, apart from what I've summarised in that previous word cloud? They said the arts boards they've known, when they first came onto the board, it was a mishmash of self-interest groups. We've completely turned that over. In other words, arts boards have been traditionally inwardly focused, but they're under a period of great change. And as I mentioned previously in comparing them to sport boards, there are quite a number of similarities between arts boards and sport boards in that they've often moved from this position where they were a mishmash of self-interest groups, rather clubby, as somebody said to me about a regional art museum in Victoria only recently when I interviewed them just a couple of weeks ago. And that has been turned around. The second thing they said to me is that getting in outsiders is a strategy for growth. Outsiders see things differently. And this really leads on from the first quote from the male arts board member, where they turned over that clubby, inward-looking arts board and brought in new people who had new ideas and different ways of seeing things that made their board more strategic and their company more robust. And finally, it's about facing reality. That passion can be used to generate change. How passionate I am about this arts board. I tell them things they don't want to hear, but they need to hear. And this was from an arts board member who'd been brought onto that board to generate change. So diversity on arts boards can be often about making things change and changing it from that clubby, inward, closed group to something that's broader, more diverse and more accepting. One of the other things that people talk to me about with diversity on arts boards is that arts boards can be quite different in one way from sport boards and indeed from corporate boards. They are often seen as a feminine culture, and this can be a positive and a negative. Someone said to me, a man, we don't want to be seen as an Anglo-Celtic outpost when the game has changed. So they wanted to change their arts board. But another man said to me, some might think it a bit of feat to engage with the arts and be on an arts board. Now, the person who said this has been on a number of arts boards, really big elite boards at the national level, and boards like the National Gallery of Australia and on the Australia Council for the Arts Board. So this is a powerful male figure who's prepared to give his time to arts boards, but recognises that others might think they're a feat, and in fact, you're wasting your time. Why not go on a corporate board? Others talked about why diversity is coming about is that arts boards and their members, their directors, want to become more accountable. They talked about the significant change that's occurred on arts boards, where previously the arts board used to do very little and have a chat among friends. It was a bit of like a café clutch, as the Germans say, a coffee club. But now it's become much more of a skills-based board. It's no use just having passion. As I said earlier, you need legal, financial, business skills as well as passion. And this was from another female arts board member. So people who are involved in organisations that are there looking how they can do social and economic good, such as Rotary, could use their skills to great effect by being on an arts board. You don't just have to know about the art or love the art, although most people do who are on our arts boards. Now, power and influence was a big theme that came out of the interviews of the people I spoke to. Someone said to me in relation to power and the arts board, it's easier to get a role on an arts board. Many small arts organisations have small budgets and women find it easier to access them, and therefore they use them as a stepping stone sometimes to get onto more prestigious boards over time. That's not the case with everybody, but if you want to get board experience, you can often get it on a smaller arts board. So they're seen as organisations at the small end of the arts that don't have the power and influence that, for example, an elite board might have. So an elite board in Adelaide would be the Art Gallery of South Australia or the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra Board. And they do have a lot more power and influence and prestige, and indeed they are ministerial appointments. The influence, one of the other females I interviewed said, I've hit the glass ceiling. I'm ready for more challenges. I'm frustrated, but where do I go from here? I'm not empowered to make changes. So they felt that their influence on the arts board was not what it should have been, and their voice wasn't listened to. So diversity is a movable feast. It's not finished, it's just beginning, even though arts boards have been quite diverse over the last 30 years with a balance of male and female members. But that's not true in diversity when you look at other areas of diversity. Gender diversity, they are diverse, but not ethnic diversity, and maybe sexual orientation and other things. They may not be declared, but they're not as diverse in those ways. So the arts are looking to make further changes to further diversify their arts boards, and this is in line with state government policy in South Australia, according to the paper that came out in 2019 by the state government. So I mentioned that it may be seen to be a feat to be on an arts board because they are perceived as feminine, and that it is an element of truth that the arts aren't considered as important as some other boards, and therefore perhaps men have let the barriers down and let women get inside the door. Some people might think it a feat. Is it manly to be engaged with an arts board? And it is also hard work. It's similar to being on a sport board in this respect, where you've got most of the money on an arts board or a sport board, and most of the money for the organisation goes to the artists or the athletes. There's very little for administration. The board works pro bono, and therefore you have to work hard. And it's a mix of strategic work and indeed, with the CEO's approval, operational work, because you often do not have the range of people in line management who can undertake that work because you can't afford to employ them. But nonetheless, if you want kudos, if you want status, would you go on an arts board? And that's what some people asked me when I talked to them. Next slide, please. Further than that, it's not just about passion. It's not just about the arts being seen as feminine, but going through change. There has been a significant shift where skills and networks are becoming more and more important for people who want to be on an arts board. There's been wide recognition that passion just doesn't cut it as much as people are passionate about the arts, but you've got to have those hard skills. So the first person I spoke to who was an Ethnic Arts Board member, if you have those skills, you're halfway there. You need to match the skill set to the organisation needs, and there's been a tendency on arts boards to push for having skill-based governance. And this is something the state government in South Australia has talked about in their arts plan that they brought out in 2019 as their policy document. Looking at networks, I made sure that I did speak to people who came from different ethnic backgrounds to ensure that I could get their insights on how arts boards help them. And one Chinese Malaysian who again has worked on major elite arts boards at state level and nationally, he said, I have skills in Asian engagement. People from different backgrounds look at things from different perspectives. The work on that arts board was illuminating. Now, he personally donated $10 million to a major national art gallery in Australia because he's made a lot of money through his property development business, but he also introduced people to his network in Asia that would help that gallery. So he's been enormously influential in strengthening the gallery's network that will bring more skills, more networks, and of course more money to the organisation, because arts organisations are always asset rich and cash poor. And the third quote on the page here is that the spread and mix of expertise on arts boards is enriching. Having those people on the board has been an important aspect of the board growing up. They're pushing us into the future. And again, this was a female Ethnic Arts Board member who felt she had got opportunities and it had broadened what she could do, and she could broaden what the arts organisation was capable of as well. So what I found in looking at arts boards is that there are surface and submerged logics that are operating on those arts boards that make it a very complex mix of dynamics and processes that are not always immediately apparent when you look at those arts boards. For example, there are certain invisible skills and characteristics, such as capability to network, skills in finance, law, accounting, marketing, fundraising, whatever it might be, of directors who are demographically different, which could recategorise them as in-group members. So this is quite complex to understand, but the argument I'm making is that there are many directors on arts boards that at first blush might look like everyone else. So I'm going to draw on Adriano, your president, who maybe I could say looks like me, but I can see from his name and hear from his accent, he's Italian. And so I can see that he comes from a different ethnic background. But because of his skill set and his capability to network, he's been accepted as demographically similar to other people who are on the board that he may be on, even though he is ethnically different. So there's quite a lot of that going on in Australia, where we have accepted now people from Italian heritage, Greek heritage, Polish heritage, and really don't really consider them as significantly different, but they are demographically different from the white Anglo-Saxon members of the community who've been here for a longer period of time. So that is one of the key findings that I identified from talking to these 100-odd people who've been on arts boards. And that also allowed me to come up with a board culture statement, where I found that predominantly the people who work on arts boards and sit on arts boards are honest, open, hardworking, unified as a team, all towards achieving the same goals and the same strategic priorities. That's what they're looking to do. Today, I'm not going to talk about the different board roles that I have seen operating on arts boards, but it is something I could bring out if you were interested in it in questions. And finally, the values that also came out of this study is that there's a very strong move towards professionalism and away from that clubby arts board. So there's strong integrity, excuse me, hay fever, impartiality and transparency, and indeed accountability in the way that arts boards are now working, and they're moving very rapidly to do the best they can in that space. One of the other values is they are becoming much more strategic. Traditionally, arts boards have had what is called a committee mentality, and quite often they were just advisory committees in the past. But more recently, they've been made into proper boards, if you would, that give the organisation the independence and the legislative framework to allow them to do the range of things that a full board does. And indeed, fundraising is a key part of that in these uncertain times where government funding is going to continue to decline. And finally, the other value is arts boards and the people on them are pretty inclusive. Arts are open to diversity. They are more diverse in a gender sense than many other boards, if not so much in an ethnic sense, although that's changing rapidly. And they are supportive, they believe and support teamwork, they work cohesively, they're engaged and they're honest, as I said before. There is sometimes an underlying tension on arts boards that can burst up to the surface if other things aren't right. And again, I'm not dwelling on that in detail today, but there is always an underneath sort of boiling of tensions that can spring up from time to time. I have mentioned that, so we'll just skip over that slide. Thank you, Rajiv. And so from that, in a publication that's under second review and I hope gets over the line, I, with my co-authors, have developed a diversity dynamics framework for arts boards, where we've looked at the sorts of things that are putting pressures on those boards. And clearly there are funding pressures in the environment. In South Australia, we've seen that, but we've seen it nationally and internationally, right back to the global financial crisis. And it's going to be at a critical point now with COVID-19, where arts organisations have to pay their wages, pay their rent, and their overheads, but they don't have any income from audience activities. And that's a major problem for them. The community support services that go on and the arts organisations very closely work with the community. It's very, very central to what arts organisations do, and that's very important. Sometimes they have divergent objectives, of course, because they are not there to make a profit. They're there to do social good. They are registered as a charity, but that's one of those areas where those tensions can bubble up from underneath. And finally, arts boards can't do it alone. They have to work with stakeholders. The stakeholders, of course, are going to be people and organisations like government, like politicians, philanthropists, trusts and foundations, places and people such as yourselves in Rotary, universities, community organisations, and so on and so forth. In the centre, I've talked about how recategorisation can lead to diversity, where people get the confidence to feel that someone who is different underneath has similarities that makes them feel they can trust them, that they are authentic. And that leads to a focus on skills and networking. So the triggers for diversity on the left-hand side are power and influence, and arts boards not being perceived as so powerful, and the arts being seen as feminine, which meant the barriers have been brought down more easily and quickly than on some boards, particularly sport boards, but also corporate boards. And this has led to diversity in board competition, the types of people, their backgrounds, their skills, capability to network, and also a perceived homogeneity on the surface, but underneath a heterogeneity that you don't always see. Next slide, please. So all these changes are enhancing board strategic capability in 4 key ways. The first one is that boards are becoming more strategic. They're looking at what is changing in the environment, and through that board CEO shared leadership and relationship, they are seeking to do things differently. The second one is that boards are affected by interorganisational relationships. As I said in the previous slide, arts boards can't do it alone, nor can sport boards, and they need to interact with stakeholders and work with them, be they community, government, industry, philanthropy, universities, whoever that might be. The third one is that this leads to the need for collaborative partnerships and power sharing with stakeholders. And you'll often see stakeholders on the board of arts organisations assisting to make that arts organisation successful. And finally, this is achieved by functional balance. And I'll go to my next slide and explain that a little bit more in detail. Thank you. So firstly, boards operate with a balance between performance, which is strategic, and conformance, which is the monitoring and control role, such as financial and legal controls, regulations, this sort of thing. And there's a tolerance range there where you can tip on that seesaw between the two, but you have to understand how far you tip before it becomes unbalanced. So the red side, the performance side, which is strategic, you've got that the strategy is crafted between the CEO and stakeholders. The boards don't do it alone. If you do it alone, you can become insular, inward looking, and you're more likely to lead to failure. But this will help you frame board processes that are going to make your meeting processes, your functionality more operationally effective. And that you're going to oversee relational strategic decisions with those stakeholders and using those processes. That's the strategic or performance side. On the conformance side, the control and monitoring part, you're going to ensure you're accountable by integrating what you do into the board dynamics, how people work as a group, the role between the chair and the board members, the chair and the CEO. You're going to harness that passion so that it works for the good of the organisation and doesn't boil over into bitchiness, nastiness, infighting. And you're going to ensure that you're engaged with what's called will and skill, using people's skills, their will, their motivation to do the best for the organisation. And that's about leadership. Next, thank you, Rajiv. So here you can see that looking at the organisation on the left, the balance is the way that you use these things as a strategic resource, which creates direction for your organisation, focusing on the composition roles and norms, and controlling and directing in the way that you make sure that you're looking to your budget being in balance, and that allows you to do more creative, artistic things. Or in sport, allows you to do engage more in sport. And at the bottom of the screen, I just tell you about some of the things I've done with board workshops for different arts organisations and indeed sporting organisations. I've worked with the Dragon Boats of Australia organisation. I've done forums or workshops. I've observed board meetings. I've held stakeholder discussions. I've interviewed more than 85 up to 100 people now, and I've attended regular board meetings as a participant and an observer, of course. And this has allowed me to come to some of these conclusions about how to balance the strategic and operational aspects of the board that are so necessary in order to get it right. Mostly people on arts boards want to talk about the art because they have that passion, but you have to encourage people on arts boards to be strategic and to lift their performance beyond just talking about the art, remembering that that's the role of the artistic director primarily and secondarily the CEO, and that the board's there for a different purpose. Next slide, please. So, for small arts organisations, small sport organisations, small organisations in the non-profit sector generally, I say 3 strategies are enough. Don't overload your arts organisation by having an inch-thick book strategic plan. And here's a quote from someone in a major touring performing arts organisation in Australia who said to me, "We're going through a renovation at the National Music Organisation," where I interviewed her. It was triggered by a review of board papers, and she found those board papers particularly illuminating, as she told me. And she started to ask herself, how does the board add value, and how she needed to believe in that and bring people along from that perspective. They don't always know how they can add value in strategy. That can be the weakness of some arts boards, and they really have to think consciously about how they can focus on it and not get involved in too much of the day-to-day detail. Next, thank you. So, in summary, it's a theory of balance, strategic balance, and it's a balancing act. And all of us who are on boards need to think about what's the focus of your board and what aspect are you focusing on? Do you need to refocus, and are performance and conformance strategy and operations for you in balance? Thank you. There's one more slide, I think. Yes, so finally, I'm saying that the balance means that looking at governance, you're going to be balancing performance and conformance, and by doing the two, that really is a strategic way of undertaking your board role, and it will allow each board director to achieve integrated governance, working for the best for the organisation to ensure its sustainability. Thank you. Questions?
Okay, any questions? I'll try to see if I can see any.
I was going to type it out, but it's probably quicker just to visualise it. Director Education, where do you see that fitting into this sort of continuum?
Yes, look, I'm a member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. I'm a big believer in director education, and the AICD itself has professionalised enormously over the last 30 years as governance has become professionalised. I guess how new governance is to the space that we live in is that really governance as a research area probably only started in about the 80s, whereas management's been going since the 1930s. So it's relatively new as a field of research, as it is for a field of practice. And probably the focus that the state government's put on governance in its arts plan 2019 is evidence of the fact that they recognise that boards can be more influential and powerful. They can do a lot to help arts organisations survive and thrive, and education through the AICD or indeed through other means is a part of that. And I have done education for arts organisations. I've done built, induction programs, induction packs, and all sorts of things. And I certainly have an educative role at the arts organisations where I sit on the board. I've always been encouraging of bringing in guest speakers so that the board gets a wide understanding of what's going on with other people who are on different sorts of boards and doing different sorts of things. So it can be formal, like taking the course at the AICD, or it can be informal, more professional development, and they're both very important.
I guess I'll just quickly add a trailer on that comment. I used to be the state manager for the Institute of Company Directors. One of the big issues, though, is the cost of the course, particularly for not-for-profits and so on. So I don't know, maybe that ought to be something that the government deals into its strategy, so that there is some kind of, not perhaps the whole 9 yards of the company directors course, but just enough to get people, well, part of the induction, as you say.
Yes,
because
yes.
I've got to say, there's nothing worse than trying to sit on a board with people who've got not a clue what it is that they're doing, and they can be really destructive.
Yes, and they haven't read the papers and so forth. I think that there's a possibility where the government, I know it's strapped for cash and it's going to be worse after COVID-19 plus bushfires, but if the government, or maybe a philanthropist or a trust or foundation could provide 50% of the cost, the other 50% would be tax deductible. If you're working on an arts board, even if unpaid, and you've got another job and that is paid, and that this is part of your professional development, I think you can argue, but you need accountant's advice, but you could argue that this was necessary for you to be able to do the job, and you could account for 50% through tax deductibility and 50% through some support by some do-good individual or organisation or government.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions? We have Lisa joining us. Hi, Lisa. How are you? Yes. Lisa is with us. And any other questions for Ruth? Yeah, Jeffrey. Yes, Jeffrey. Yes.
Ruth, thank you for your talk and your enlightenment. Having sat on both arts, sports and business boards, I'd like to suggest that your talk could be taken by many different boards in all of the different categories.
Thank you.
It's very well done, and the principles apply regardless of what type of board that you're sitting on. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Raju?
Yep, Peter Neal.
I echo Jeffrey's comments. Ruth, it was fascinating, and I also thought it would apply it across the board, excuse the pun, not just to the arts. Your informative charts about the balancing performance and conformance, and it was, I don't know whether it was deliberate or just by weight of effort, balanced, skewed towards conformance. And observationally, we seem to spend a lot of time these days observing at boards, spending a lot of time trying to conform to various sets of rules, regulations and whatever, and perhaps taking their eye on off the ball of performing for the shareholders.
Look, that's a great point. I think we're weighed down by conformance sometimes, and for small organisations it is a huge weight because they don't have the big infrastructure that allows you to do what you can do, say, at the University of South Australia, where you always have an executive officer taking minutes, writing them up, disseminating them. We don't have that at the Australian Dance Theatre. It's one of us who takes the minutes. We don't have, I did work with the Museums Victoria some years ago. They have an executive officer. They're a big elite arts organisation, and there's 3 or 4 museums under the umbrella of Museums Victoria, as it's called now, and they have a kind of lion at the gate. She is a lawyer, and you can't even speak to the board members because she's there protecting them. And they can afford to do that, but many arts organisations can't. It's quite different from those small to medium sector ones. That's a great point.
Okay, we have time for Adriano. Yes.
And Tony Mill.
Adria, you need to unmute. Yeah.
Just unmuting myself.
Yep, got it.
Ruth, my question is: are there? You mentioned about the, the possibility of lack of skill set and availability of skill set. Is there a tool that would allow that to be matched? Like if there are people out there that would want to be on a board, and there are boards that would require those skill sets that are available, how do these two meet or can connect?
Look, is it Chatham House rules here today, Rajiv?
Yes, it is.
It is? Okay. So on the Australian Dance Theatre Board, where I'm a board member, we have brought in a new executive director, our CEO. For the first time, I led the recruitment process for them. And I do have a background as an HR director in a past life before I joined the university. It's not uncommon for people in business schools at university to have a business background. And I was very keen I love the work that they put on at ADT. I wanted to see us get the best executive director we could. So we had a professional recruitment process. We rewrote the PD, we advertised it, the position through a number of channels online and through networks and so forth. So really sent it out there. Prepared questions for the interviews, make sure we had a panel and, followed it through. And we've got a great guy, Nick Hayes, who's been here since November now, and he's doing a fantastic job. And in these difficult times that we find ourselves in, how fortunate are we to have that wonderful company where not only the front of house with the wonderful work, but we're getting the back of house right. And the other thing I did when I joined the board, and we had several board vacancies, they'd never advertised for board members before, and we advertised. We advertised through AICD, we advertised through Arts Hub, an online sort of news and recruitment network, and we got 37 applications for 3 vacancies. Now, isn't that amazing? So, broadening the pool and seeing what comes in is so important to bringing in new ideas and strengthening the organisation from top to bottom. So they're just a couple of things we did to sort of, I suppose, change the way things were done to strengthen the organisation. It's such an important organisation for South Australia.
Yeah. Thank you. The last question, one last question from Tony Mill. Tony, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My question is really a follow-up of something that Peter said about the conformance balance. I have never sat on the sort of board that you're talking about, but I do have a certain amount of experience as president of a large CFS organisation and on school boards and so on. And the biggest difficulty that I had in those sorts of chairing those sorts of committees was getting my committees or boards to understand the legal framework within which they were working. And I mean, that's obviously a conformance issue. Now, I'm not sure whether that's a comment or a question.
And Tony, may I ask, are you a lawyer by background?
Sorry?
Could I ask, are you a lawyer?
No.
No, but but getting people to understand the law, that's right. Well, I think all I would say is that I've learned when to ask the right questions and to know when I need advice, because I am not a lawyer either, and I would not want to suggest that I could understand the law the way a lawyer does. But it is very important to know when to ask the right questions so that you can get the advice that's going to protect the organisation.
Okay. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks for your time. I will quickly share my screen to show you something which will be mailed to you shortly. to thank you. We've made a contribution on behalf of you.
Oh, that's very nice.
You can rotate it.
Yes, so its donation has been made in your name to help eradicate polio. So that's one of the causes which Rotary holds very dearly, and this will be, I'll email it to you, and also it'll come in the snail mail to you. So thank you for your time. And I would request, if you can unmute yourself and please show our happiness and acknowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a privilege to be here virtually today and have a virtual lunch.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks. I'll hand it over back to President Adrian.
Yes, thank you very much, Ruth. That was it was a fantastic presentation, and I fully endorse the comments made by Jeff earlier and Pete as well. A special thank you to all of our participants today to the online meeting, and we hope to see you again soon. Glad also glad as always to see that Lisa was able to join us today. It's fantastic to see you, Lisa. We hope to have you back here online in next week. Next week we will be back here, and our guest speaker will be Dr. Matthew Tetlow, founder and CEO of Innovor Technologies. His topic will be nanosatellites and space industry in South Australia. I will now close today's meeting. Thank you all for being with us, and we hope to see you again next week. Stay safe, and see you soon. Just one final word. I'm now going to set up the breakout rooms, and I'll set up 4 rooms, so there'll be probably a few more people than last week, and you can continue the chat in there. Goodbye.